February 1943. The North African desert stretches in endless ochre waves, wind lifting fine sand into shifting curtains. Dawn breaks over the jagged peaks near the Kasserine Pass, casting long shadows across abandoned Italian bunkers and the scarred ground of recent artillery duels. The air is tense, metallic with the smell of spent shells and diesel from battered tanks. In the distance, columns of German Afrika Korps vehicles rattle along narrow passes, their engines echoing against the rocky ridges. American soldiers, green and untested, dig foxholes under the harsh winter sun, rifles ready, faces streaked with dust and fear. Commanders shout orders over the din of mortars and machine gun fire, their words carried away by the dry, sharp wind. Rommel, the desert fox, surveys the terrain from a ridgeline, keen eyes tracing the movements of an army he once underestimated. The battlefield hums with imminent chaos. Every sound, the snap of a rifle, the thrum of artillery, the distant scream of an engine, signals a test of courage, tactics, and endurance. By the time the first volleys tear through the pass, perceptions will shift, and one of the war's most brilliant commanders will reconsider the American soldier entirely, forced to measure them not by reputation but by action under fire. The sun climbs higher, dust rises. The Kasserine Pass awakens. By early 1943, the North African campaign had become a critical theatre in the Second World War. Axis forces, led by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, had advanced across Libya into Tunisia, seeking to protect the southern flank of Europe and secure access to vital Mediterranean ports. The Allied forces, a mix of American, British, and French units, were tasked with halting this advance and preparing for a broader push into Europe. For the Germans, the desert offered both opportunity and risk. Supply lines stretched across hundreds of miles of hostile terrain, vulnerable to Allied interdiction, while the Americans were still acclimating to the realities of modern mechanized warfare. The American II Corps, under the command of Major General Lloyd Fredendall, had recently arrived in North Africa after the Operation Torch landings in November 1942. These troops, many drawn from inexperienced infantry and hastily trained units, were ordered to take positions along the Kasserine Pass, a narrow corridor flanked by mountains and high ridges. Strategically, the pass was a natural choke point, its rugged terrain favoring defenders who could hold the high ground. Rommel, familiar with desert warfare, understood its significance. Intelligence reports underestimated the American presence. But the Germans noted the unusual composition of the II Corps: fresh troops, limited combat experience, and a lack of cohesion in combined arms operations. Tanks were fewer in number and maintenance irregular, artillery pieces scattered. Command structures were still adapting to battlefield realities, with communications often failing under pressure. For Rommel, the initial expectation was that these inexperienced soldiers would falter against his battle-hardened troops. He assumed speed, coordination, and firepower would decide the engagement before morale could stabilize. Despite these assumptions, the Americans had begun to adapt. Patrols probed German positions, engineers prepared defensive obstacles, and artillery units established forward firing points. These movements were cautious but deliberate, signaling a willingness to hold ground under threat. The German commanders observed but underestimated the Americans' capacity for rapid learning. The stage was set for a confrontation where tactics, terrain, and human resilience would collide. The morning of February 19th approached with the desert cold biting at untested troops. Shadows lengthened across the rocky spurs, tanks rumbled into position, and radio operators scrambled to relay final orders. The scene was primed for an encounter that would test assumptions, reveal unexpected strengths, and force Rommel to confront a reality that would challenge his preconceptions about American soldiers. As the hours passed on February 19, 1943, the Kasserine Pass became a tableau of impending conflict. The American II Corps had deployed along a defensive line that stretched from the foothills of the Jebel el Hamra to the approaches of the Thala escarpment. Units were unevenly positioned, some companies exposed on open desert flats, others entrenched behind hastily constructed barricades. Communication lines were fragile, radios prone to interference, and orders often delayed. Yet there was determination, a raw resolve to hold the pass despite limited combat experience. Rommel's Afrika Korps, meanwhile, moved with the precision of veterans familiar with desert warfare. Tanks and motorized infantry advanced along narrow corridors, coordinated with artillery that could rain shells across the valley below. Luftwaffe aircraft patrolled overhead, scouting positions and strafing defensive emplacements. Rommel relied on speed, mobility, and the psychological impact of aggressive action, anticipating that the Americans' inexperience would crumble under the weight of mechanized assault. Intelligence, however, began to reveal anomalies, small units holding positions longer than expected, artillery counterfire more coordinated than initial reports suggested. The terrain amplified the tension. The pass was flanked by ridges and rocky spurs, natural vantage points that could turn a well-timed ambush into a decisive defensive action. Narrow defiles restricted tank movements, while gullies and dry riverbeds offered cover for infantry. Rommel, observing from the high ground, understood that these features could disrupt his rapid assault plan. Success would depend not solely on firepower, but on the coordination of combined arms, timing, and adaptability under pressure. American leadership struggled to impose order. Fredendel's headquarters were distant from the front lines, delaying the transmission of crucial tactical decisions. Soldiers relied on local initiative, sergeants and lieutenants making immediate choices under fire. Despite inexperience, small units demonstrated emerging tactical awareness, adjusting firing positions, establishing interlocking fields of fire, and executing retreating maneuvers without complete disintegration. Each action chipped away at the German assumption that the Americans would collapse under pressure. By mid-afternoon, the first collisions occurred. Skirmishes erupted along ridges and rocky spurs, machine gun nests engaged advancing tanks, and artillery shells splintered into defensive positions. Rommel began to observe the Americans' response, their resolve, their capacity to regroup, and their growing tactical improvisation. The early encounters foreshadowed a lesson that would resonate beyond the Kasserine Pass. These were not untested conscripts to be swept aside, but soldiers capable of adapting, learning, and resisting under fire. The stage was set for a confrontation that would alter perceptions and force a recalibration of expectations. The human dimension at Kasserine Pass revealed stark contrasts between experience and inexperience, fear and resolve. American soldiers, many fresh from training camps, confronted the brutal reality of combat for the first time. Faces streaked with dust and sweat, hands gripping rifles, they dug trenches under the watchful eyes of German scouts. Initial confusion gave way to a raw, instinctive survival drive. Small groups of soldiers coordinated under fire, establishing makeshift communication lines and improvising defensive positions. Their fear did not vanish, but it transformed into determination as comrades fell and positions were tested. Rommel, observing from the ridges, noted the resilience, moments of hesitation followed by rapid adaptation, showing a capacity for endurance he had not anticipated. These human reactions forced a re-evaluation of American capabilities beyond mere reputation or training manuals. The Kasserine engagement was a case study in terrain-driven tactics. The narrow pass limited German tank maneuvers, funneling armored columns into predictable lines of approach. American units exploited ridges and rocky outcrops to establish overlapping fields of fire, creating kill zones and choke points. Mortar teams, artillery observers, and machine gun crews coordinated despite fragmented communications. The Americans' uneven experience paradoxically contributed to tactical unpredictability. Improvisation countered the German expectation of linear, disciplined defense. Rommel's original plan for a swift breakthrough encountered delays as small-scale defensive actions inflicted disproportionate disruption. By the afternoon, German advances had slowed, emphasizing that terrain and tactical ingenuity could offset raw experience. Equipment reliability and adaptability defined early engagements. German Panzer III and IV tanks, supported by mobile artillery, initially dominated the battlefield, exploiting superior firepower and mobility. American forces relied on a mix of light tanks, artillery, and mortars, with some units facing equipment shortages or mechanical failures. Despite this, improvised coordination allowed infantry to neutralize armor through strategic placement of anti-tank weapons and terrain utilization. Radio communication, though inconsistent, facilitated limited coordination. The technological disparity highlighted both the Germans' operational advantages and the Americans' ability to leverage limited resources effectively under extreme conditions, demonstrating early signs of evolving battlefield competency. Command decisions shaped the flow of engagement. Rommel's boldness reflected confidence in rapid, decisive action, aiming to exploit weaknesses before American defenses could stabilize. In contrast, Fredendall's leadership suffered from distance and communication lag, delaying critical tactical responses. Yet, on the ground, junior officers and NCOs demonstrated initiative, filling command gaps and stabilizing defensive efforts. Leadership at Kasserine became decentralized by necessity, revealing how adaptive command structures could emerge spontaneously under pressure. Rommel's observations of this emergent coordination forced him to reconsider assumptions about American command effectiveness. German forces initially underestimated the Americans, assuming inexperience would translate into predictable mistakes and rapid collapse. Reconnaissance reports, however, indicated unexpected resilience, small units holding positions under artillery fire, executing tactical withdrawals without complete disarray, and counterattacking in localized sectors. Rommel, accustomed to swift desert maneuvers, recognized that the Americans' reaction times, while slower than seasoned troops, were improving under pressure. The ability of tout corps to absorb shock, regroup, and re-engage challenged the German perception of the enemy as inherently weak. By the end of the first day, German commanders acknowledged a growing difficulty in projecting their superiority across the pass. Morale at Kasserine was fluid, shaped by both fear and necessity. American troops, facing mechanized assault and artillery barrages, initially exhibited panic and hesitation, yet moments of cohesion, protecting wounded comrades, maintaining defensive fire, and executing counterattacks, boosted confidence incrementally. Conversely, German troops experienced frustration as expected breakthroughs stalled, confronting a resilient and adaptive enemy. Morale shifts affected operational tempo, hesitation delayed advances, while American determination extended defensive lines beyond expectations. This psychological interplay became a critical factor in the engagement's unfolding. Kasserine Pass exposed the steep learning curve for American forces. Early tactical errors, misplaced artillery, inadequate reconnaissance, fragmented coordination, provided immediate lessons. Rapid observation and adaptation followed, repositioning of machine guns, coordinated withdrawal, and improved inter-unit signaling. By the second day, American forces demonstrated emerging competence in small unit leadership and defensive coordination. Rommel, observing these adjustments, recognized that the Americans were not static targets. They were learning, adapting, and capable of translating battlefield experience into operational effectiveness. The battle's broader significance lay in its exposure of systemic strengths and weaknesses. For the Americans, Kasserine revealed gaps in training, command structure, and combined arms integration, prompting immediate post-battle reforms. For the Germans, it highlighted the limits of tactical superiority against a responsive enemy exploiting terrain and improvisation. Rommel's reassessment of American capabilities influenced subsequent engagements, tempering assumptions of easy victories and emphasizing the importance of caution, reconnaissance, and respect for opponent adaptability. The morning of February 20th, 1943, brought the decisive moments at Kasserine Pass. German forces, confident from initial skirmishes, launched a coordinated assault on American positions near the Thala escarpment. Panzer divisions advanced in dense columns, their engines roaring across the narrow desert corridor, while Afrika Korps infantry followed, intent on securing the flanks. Artillery barrages pounded American defensive positions, flattening foxholes and sending plumes of dust into the cold, dry air. American soldiers faced overwhelming firepower. Mortar teams struggled to maintain effective rates of fire as communications failed under pressure. Yet, under the leadership of junior officers, defensive lines held longer than expected. A platoon of American infantry, positioned on a ridge overlooking the main pass, utilized interlocking fields of fire to halt a German advance for crucial minutes. Machine guns chattered, rifles cracked, and the crackle of artillery punctuated the tense silence between volleys. Rommel, observing from a ridge, noted the Americans' discipline under fire. Despite evident inexperience, they were not breaking. They were adapting. Units repositioned quickly. Counterattacks were launched in small, precise bursts, and casualties were evacuated without creating total chaos. The Germans, expecting an immediate collapse, encountered an enemy whose improvisation and tenacity disrupted the timing of the assault. As midday approached, armored engagements became critical. German Panzer Force advanced along the pass, encountering American 37mm anti-tank guns positioned in concealed defiles. The initial wave of tanks was slowed, some destroyed, forcing a temporary pause in the German advance. Rommel's forces began recalculating. American defenses were not superficial obstacles but active, reactive, and increasingly coordinated. The Desert Fox realized that momentum alone would not secure victory. Careful planning, patience, and respect for the opponent's adaptability were now necessary. By late afternoon, the first phase of the battle concluded without a decisive breakthrough. German casualties mounted while American forces, battered but unbroken, maintained critical positions. The battle had shifted from a test of raw strength to a contest of resilience, adaptation, and leadership under fire. The experience forced Rommel to reassess the American soldier's potential, marking a turning point in his strategic calculus for North Africa. The second day, February 21, 1943, intensified the confrontation at Kasserine Pass. German forces renewed their assault, this time targeting multiple sectors simultaneously to stretch American defenses. Panzer divisions maneuvered through narrow corridors, while Afrika Korps infantry attempted to envelop American flanks. Artillery fire fell in rhythmic barrages, shaking the desert and tearing apart defensive positions. Yet, American soldiers held, drawing upon lessons learned from the previous day. The Americans' tactical evolution became evident. Forward observers adjusted artillery fire with unprecedented accuracy, compensating for earlier miscalculations. Infantry squads coordinated with anti-tank teams to create layered defenses. When German tanks penetrated shallowly, they were met with concentrated fire from multiple directions. Supply shortages and disjointed command structures slowed American reactions, but local initiative filled the gaps, creating pockets of resistance that frustrated the German advance. Rommel's perspective shifted as he observed these dynamics. He noted the capacity of American troops to absorb punishment, reorganize, and counterattack in localized areas. Even inexperienced soldiers demonstrated initiative, taking advantage of terrain to delay, channel, or repel superior forces. The Desert Fox, who had expected rapid capitulation, began to recognize that American resilience was not a fluke, but a developing competence under pressure. By afternoon, German attacks stalled at key positions. Losses among panzer divisions increased, supply convoys were harried by artillery and infantry fire, and Luftwaffe support could not fully compensate. The Americans, battered but unyielding, maintained critical high ground. This standoff demonstrated that a force previously dismissed as untested could, through adaptation and courage, impose operational limits on a more experienced adversary. As the sun fell over the desert, Rommel ordered a tactical pause, not from defeat but from recognition. The American soldier could fight effectively, learn quickly, and endure hardships once assumed insurmountable. The events at Kasserine Pass had irrevocably altered his assessment. The encounter concluded without a total German breakthrough, but with a fundamental recalibration in strategy. Rommel would approach subsequent engagements with a new respect for the capabilities of American forces, forever changing his operational assumptions in North Africa. The immediate aftermath of Kasserine Pass left both sides reeling. German forces, though tactically proficient, failed to achieve a decisive breakthrough. Losses included dozens of tanks, several artillery pieces, and hundreds of personnel casualties across panzer and infantry units. The attack had revealed the limitations of aggressive maneuver without full intelligence and coordination, highlighting the hazards of underestimating an opponent, even one considered inexperienced. Rommel documented the encounter meticulously, noting the Americans' surprising resilience, their ability to regroup under fire, and the emergent effectiveness of local leadership within two corps. For the Americans, the battle was a stark, costly lesson. Casualties numbered over 3,000, including dead, wounded, and missing. Equipment losses were substantial. Tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces were destroyed or abandoned. Yet the psychological impact was paradoxically constructive. Soldiers and junior officers witnessed firsthand the consequences of inadequate preparation, but also the potential of adaptive tactics and determination. The engagement highlighted systemic weaknesses, gaps in leadership, communication failures, and logistical vulnerabilities, forcing rapid post-battle reforms. Critically, the American Army emerged from Kasserine with a nascent understanding of modern mechanized warfare. Training programs were revised. Officers were rotated to gain frontline experience, and combined arms coordination was emphasized. Lessons from Kasserine were codified in reports circulated throughout II Corps and higher command, forming the foundation for improved performance in subsequent North African operations. Rommel, reflecting on the engagement, adjusted his operational approach. Intelligence estimates of American capabilities were updated and tactical assumptions recalibrated. The Desert Fox recognized that raw speed and firepower were insufficient. Psychological and adaptive factors now carried equal weight. The Kasserine experience forced German commanders to respect the Americans not merely as inexperienced conscripts, but as soldiers capable of resilience, learning, and improvisation under extreme conditions. In the weeks following Kasserine Pass, the consequences rippled through both armies. For the Americans, immediate operational adjustments reshaped command and tactics. Major General Fredendall was replaced by General George S. Patton, whose aggressive leadership style emphasized discipline, mobility, and rapid decision-making. Corps underwent extensive retraining. Infantry units learned coordinated fire and maneuver tactics. Artillery units improved targeting and communication protocols, and armored formations integrated more closely with supporting infantry. Equipment shortages were addressed, and logistical chains streamlined to ensure supply consistency under combat conditions. German forces also adapted. Rommel, forced to contend with a resilient opponent, modified attack strategies to include more reconnaissance, staggered assaults, and cautious exploitation of terrain advantages. The psychological impact of encountering unexpectedly competent American units lingered. Reports noted the Americans' emerging proficiency in combined arms defense, their willingness to hold positions under intense fire, and their capacity to learn from initial mistakes. The experience reshaped German expectations for future engagements in Tunisia, signaling that victory would require sustained planning and attention to adaptive enemy behavior. Strategically, Kasserine Pass had broader implications. It demonstrated that even inexperienced forces could influence operational outcomes through rapid adaptation, leadership at the small unit level, and effective use of terrain. The engagement became a turning point for the U.S. Army in North Africa, providing a practical template for future operations in Sicily and Italy. Rommel's reassessment of American soldiers influenced both tactical planning and the broader German approach to the Allied advance, forcing recalibrations in operational doctrine across the theater. The battle left a lasting imprint on participants. Soldiers carried scars, both physical and psychological, but also gained confidence and experience that would prove decisive in later engagements. Commanders on both sides were reminded that underestimation carried real consequences and that the character of a fighting force could not be judged solely by prior reputation. Kasserine Pass became a testament to learning under fire, resilience in adversity, and the tangible evolution of combat capability in real time. Kasserine Pass became more than a tactical engagement. It was a crucible in which perceptions, leadership, and adaptability were tested. For Rommel, it shattered assumptions about the American soldier. Initial underestimation gave way to recognition of a capacity for endurance, learning, and improvisation under extreme conditions. For the Americans, it was a bitter but formative lesson in modern mechanized warfare, exposing weaknesses in command, coordination, and logistics, while revealing the potential of resilience and initiative. The battle illustrated a fundamental truth of combat. Success depends not solely on experience or firepower, but on the ability to observe, adapt, and respond. Terrain, morale, and leadership interplay with technology to shape outcomes, often in ways that defy expectation. Kasserine's lessons reverberated across North Africa, influencing subsequent operations in Tunisia and beyond, guiding both German caution and American reform. Historically, the engagement marked a turning point in the Allied campaign, signaling the emergence of a competent, battle-hardened American army, capable of confronting veteran adversaries. Rommel's recalibration of enemy capabilities reflected a broader recognition that warfare is dynamic and underestimation is perilous. In the shifting desert light, the Kasserine Pass stands as a reminder: combat tests more than strength, it tests perception, adaptability, and human will. It is in these crucibles that soldiers are forged, commanders are humbled, and the trajectory of war is subtly, irreversibly altered.